Hello, everyone. My name is Jordyn Smith, and I am the voice and the astrologer behind Nonconformist Conscience, the YouTube channel, and also the webpage. We have an eclipse happening on May 5th here in the United States, or May 6th in other parts of the world. I think it might be May 4th. Anyway, no, May 6th. So let me get all adjusted here. I wanted to talk about this, and I wanted to dive deeply into what this lunar eclipse happening in the sign of Scorpio means. It's really interesting to think about that this is a full moon, which is what a lunar eclipse is whenever a full moon occurs on the nodal axis. It's a partial eclipse because it's not happening directly conjunct the node. It is a few degrees out, so it's a partial eclipse for some people around the world. But the south node in Scorpio and the moon are technically conjunct, both in Scorpio, both ruled by Pluto in Aquarius. And so I want to keep it to the meat and the potatoes of evolutionary astrology. And so we always start with Pluto, and it's perfect for this because this eclipse is ruled by this Pluto. So Pluto, I'm doing this video on the 1st. And today Pluto stationed retrograde. And when Pluto is retrograde, it happens for about 5 months out of the year. This is a time where we redo, revisit, review in order to resolve. But that really is, with Pluto, it's about integrating what we've been learning. And a lunar eclipse is really speaking to a culmination of dynamics being brought into the light. That is symbolized by the moon. The sun is opposing the moon. So the sun is illuminating these emotional dynamics that are wanting to culminate. And with lunar eclipses or eclipses in general, we know that this is a transitionary period, and what they symbolize and reflect is something that we will be working on for the next 6 months until we have another eclipse season happening in the fall. So what are we supposed to be working on for 6 months here? Let me dive into this. With the moon and Scorpio, Scorpio wants to really reveal and expose dynamics that are within side of us that are dealing with a psychological and an emotional nature. And because this is a moon in Scorpio, it's really wanting us to get to the bottom of a lot of emotional and psychological things that are occurring within each one of us. If you are someone who has something at 14 degrees in the sign of Scorpio, or in any of the fixed signs, so that would be Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, or Leo, you are most definitely going to feel this more than other people. I've really been thinking about the Pluto and Scorpio generation, those that were born in 89, 90, those years, they're really going to be feeling it. The end of 89, so at the very beginning of 1989, Pluto was at 14 degrees Scorpio, and at the end of 1989, in November, December, it was at 15 degrees. But back in November of 1989, so if you were born in November of 1989, especially around the 24th, 25th, 26th, you are going to have Pluto conjunct Mars, and Mars is most likely going to be at this 14-degree mark. So there are a lot of people who are going to be feeling this very intensely There's a lot going on with Chiron in this chart as well. And for those who were born in the 80s and, you know, very early 90s, have Chiron in Cancer. And so this is also being activated. And most of us have felt this Chiron transit, you know, since 2017. And I'm going to really get into all of this information in a second, but I wanted to really put an emphasis on this. Those born in this year are really going to be feeling this. Those who have something around those degree marks and those signs of the fixed signs are going to be feeling this. So at the very least, you're going to see this be projected out into the collective. But if the moon and it's an eclipse is in Scorpio and it's wanting to expose and bring to the light of the day these emotional and psychological dynamics in order for all of us to be able to really culminate these dynamics, it's worth paying attention to. I feel like a lot of people are having external things be triggered, or they're having internal things on an emotional and psychological level be triggered right now. And this is like an evolutionary juncture. That's what these eclipses are. It symbolizes like this is a stage, a window of where we can really experience a rapid pace of evolution if we're willing to not resist the dynamics and we're willing to work with it. For some, they're going to resist the dynamics and they are going to experience, you know, maybe crisis in their life because of the resistance to it. And so with a Scorpio moon, there can also be a resistance. Like we know as humans, we don't really like to do things that are new. We find power, and this is a Scorpio teaching, we find power in what is known and familiar, even if it's not necessarily healthy for us. So that's just kind of a bottom line. So let me really go over everything that is occurring during this lunar eclipse, so that way everyone that wants to can consciously utilize this. So I've kind of gone over the moon, and the moon and the south node are ruled by Pluto and Aquarius. And it's at 0 degrees. It's now retrograde during this eclipse. And so there is an emphasis on the need to integrate, the need to revisit and redo in order to resolve, especially for the next coming 6 months. But Pluto in Pluto and Aquarius is really about, one, we can see it's about revolution and rebelling. It's about really challenging our inner status quo. Jeffrey Wolf Green talks about how it's a way to throw off and rebel and shed the skins of our past and anything that we've over-identified with. But it's also about really liberating from anything that keeps us from knowing our truth, like our true natures. Like none of us can say that we really know who we are without our conditioning. But Pluto and Aquarius wants us. And so the next 20 years, once it goes back into Aquarius next year, until 2044, is really wanting us to really decondition ourselves. So that way we can experience the unconditioned parts of ourself. So that way we can reveal what and whom we are, not on an egoic level, but on a very natural soul level. And so we're going to be seeing a really big shift. So also with Pluto and Aquarius, there is a need to be objective. So as we're diving deeply into our emotional dynamics, I'm really getting to the bottom of what constitutes our inner security and how we go about getting our needs met, where we feel power, where, you know, maybe there has been a sense of powerlessness or people exerting their power onto us. We need to bring in Pluto in Aquarius, that vibe of to be objective, to be very objective on where this is coming from, what this is about, and the root of it, getting to that bottom line, Pluto, Scorpio. Pluto and Aquarius is also ruled by Uranus and Taurus. And I have been talking about this. I think I even said last week, it seems like I've been talking about this for a long time because it's been in Uranus has been in Taurus for a very long time, and it will continue to be there. It's at the midpoint right now. So it shows us that when we're objective about our emotional and psychological dynamics, and we're getting to the nitty gritty, the bottom of the barrel of what constitutes our inner security, that means that we are clearing space. And with Uranus and Taurus, we get to really understand ourselves more deeply and have a transformation and a radical alteration of how we are inwardly relating. And so this full moon eclipse is really about getting to know oneself, really changing how we inwardly relate to ourselves. And the astrology leading up to this has been reflecting that as well. So Pluto is still square the nodes. And we know in evolutionary astrology, when a planet, and in this case, Pluto, is square the nodes, there, especially during a transit, there can be a propensity to be able to create skip steps for the next lifetime or within this lifetime. And so there is a need to really look at and utilize the node that planet, like I said, in this case, Pluto was last conjunct. And in this case, it is that south node in Scorpio. And so there's this emphasis on being objective, challenging the inner status quo, looking at all of our conditioning, familial, religious, societal, all of those things, and looking at how it has affected how we inwardly relate, and to get to the bottom of the dynamics and the situations that we have been in that stem from our conditioning, and really to take responsibility for our own growth in order to have that radical transformation of how we inwardly relate and our relationship to ourselves. That way we can also pull in people who are vibrating at such a frequency or the same frequency as us, instead of getting into situations where we continuously, are in relationships with people and we find out like this isn't really what I wanted or what I thought that it was going to be. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of change that can occur now and the next couple of weeks, and most definitely if you're doing this inner work over the next 6 months. And so this is it's a call to understand yourself very deeply and understand and reveal more parts of ourselves that are natural, the unconditioned or deconditioned parts of ourselves. That way we can call in people, Pluto and Aquarius, our tribe, our community, the people who resonate with us, as opposed to, I know for me, for a very long time before I found this work, I had friends that I really couldn't have these like deep, intense conversations with. And I had to, during my Saturn return, really take a look at that. And now I feel like my life is filled with people who are more at my evolutionary state or a little bit above it. And that has brought me so much joy, because I didn't realize exactly how much my soul was yearning to be around people who had the same values as me. And so this is a time where, if we're reflecting on this, you can, and you're doing the deep inner work, it will change the vibration of your soul. And you will be able to then call in the people who you now resonate with. So that's just a little bit about this. So I'm looking at the chart as I'm talking so I can make sure that I bring up everything that I want to. So the moon is opposite the sun, indicating the full moon, but it's also conjunct in a new phase with Uranus, which is at 18 degrees. And if we are doing this Plutonian work of getting to the bottom of our core dynamics of what our conditioning, how it's conditioned, how we inwardly relate, really the moon opposing the sun conjunct Uranus gives us an integration point, a place of purpose. So the place of purpose is to be objective about how we inwardly relate and really getting to know oneself and to understand oneself through that objectivity. The only way we can do that is to dive deeply and to feel, which is a very much Taurian energy. And with the North Node conjunct Mercury, retrograde, and the sign of Taurus, in mutual reception with Venus and Gemini, there is a call to really relearn what one needs, to be curious and to recontextualize and understand what each one of us on an individual level is really needing. And to be able to become self-sufficient in doing that. That's another Taurus archetype. But the only way that that can happen is through really getting to the bottom of what constitutes our inner security. So for some people, there's this wake-up call that's happening where they're looking around and they're having crisis happen in their life because they've been depending on others. And that's part of the inconjunct with Libra that happens with Taurus. And so there's this need to look at what our expectations are and where those come from, what type of conditioning created our expectations within relationships, and then asking ourselves, why can't I do that for myself? Like, I have been seeing this a lot with people as they've been not self-reliant, they've been relying on others to meet their needs when really they are needing to go within and to meet their own needs. And that stems from being conditioned. In this world, all you have to do is look at you know, like rom-coms and movies and love stories and oh my gosh, and Facebook, like no one's private, everyone's putting it out there, and it's all a projection of these relationships that we are having idealistic expectations about, that maybe it's why we see the occurrence of, oh my god, I thought those people, that couple was doing well, they were a power couple, oh my gosh, they did this, this, and this, and they were traveling in their pictures and they always look happy. And then you realize like they're getting a divorce and it's coming out of left field. And so there's this need to really look at how we've been conditioned to do partnership and how we've been conditioned to not be self-reliant, how we have, and this has to deal with also Saturn and Pisces, which is trine to the South Node and a disseminating trine, and also in a crescent phase sextile to the North Node. So Saturn in Pisces is really having us all look at our idealistic expectations. And that is Saturn through our conditioning. How have you been conditioned to view yourself? How have you been conditioned to view partnership? And where and how are you looking at what is the perfect relationship? All of these things coming up. And there's a lot of people who are needing, what I've seen in my personal practice of consulting people as of lately, is people are realizing that once they get what they thought or have been conditioned to believe is perfection, they're starting to understand that it's not. And it's throwing them back in on themselves. And so with Saturn in Pisces and a disseminating trine to the South Node, when we look at the truth as opposed to the illusion, but really intensely look at the truth, and we have a willingness to get to the bottom of our emotional and psychological dynamics within, we can dissolve those types of old values and needs that have been conditioned and have information imparted into us that can sometimes feel very divine as to what you are actually needing, the truth of what you are needing, as opposed to the conditioned reality of that. And then through the sextile, the crescent phase sextile from Saturn to the North Node, we can understand by getting to the bottom of these dynamics what it is we are needing in a natural sense. And then there can be an ease of integration of creating new values and new needs and really living that out and integrating it in fully, thus perpetuating the transformation of how we inwardly relate. So a lot of people right now can be experiencing disillusionment within relationships, whether it be friends, family, or, you know, romantic partners. And it's because they can be not meeting their own needs and having expectations for others to do that for them. Or they might have bought into the illusion that if you do X, Y, and Z, because society's told me if I do that, then I'm going to be happy. And they're realizing all of a sudden, I'm not happy. Like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. So there's this really big call to Saturn is about our structure of our consciousness. And it also is about our conditioning. What type of conditioning structures our consciousness? And with Saturn in a disseminating trine to a South Node in Scorpio, it's wanting us to get to the bottom of these dynamics. And through doing that inner excavation, we get to then create space to implement the new. And that's that crescent sextile. The disseminating trine and crescent sextile are really, really beneficial, but there can be a hang up because within that crescent phase sextile, there, and also dealing with the Scorpio dynamics, like I said, it is about what is familiar and known, and there's a need to liberate from that in order for us to continue on our evolutionary path. And so there can be this hang up on wanting to go back to the way that it was, wanting to continue with the way that it is, because even if it's not healthy, it's known and it's familiar. And whenever we challenge what's known and familiar, we can feel a sense of powerlessness. But that is really an illusion. The power comes from having the courage to release the things in our lives that are not in resonance with each one of us on an individual level that is true. So Venus is in a crescent sextile to Jupiter as this eclipse is going on. Venus is in Gemini. It's ruled by Mercury retrograde in the sign of Taurus. It's a mutual reception, which is very beautiful. And it's in a crescent phase sextile to Jupiter in the sign of Aries, which is ruled by Mars in the sign of Cancer. And that is sextile Uranus in a crescent phase sextile. So these are really beautiful placements, especially during a more challenging lunar eclipse. And it's only challenging because it's challenging our inner status quo of what is secure and what is familiar. The Venus in a crescent phase sextile to Jupiter is this need to integrate what is authentic and genuine and sincere and true about each one of us. And there is a blessing and a prayer with Jupiter that says you've got to let go of one thing in order for this to happen, though. And with Venus and Gemini sextile to this means that there's a choice to be made and a need to be curious. and a need to recontextualize and learn, because Gemini is all about the way in which we process information and assimilate it. This is also having us dive deeply into how we believe about ourselves. Jupiter, Venus being the natural ruler of Taurus, in mutual reception with Mercury in Taurus, by the way. What we believe about ourselves creates how we value ourselves. So there's a huge call to really dive deeply into the emotional body, Jupiter being ruled by Mars and the sign of Cancer, to really understand how we've been conditioned to believe affects how we value ourselves. And a need to really relearn this. And the way to tap into that is through Venus being in mutual reception with Mercury retrograde and the sign of Taurus. Listening to the inner voice and relying on our intuition and our instinct, Mars and Cancer, our gut, Cancer. And to look at how we're feeling when things are triggered. When someone says something, when we watch something, when we do something, what is the inner dialogue going on inside of your mind? And how are you inwardly relating with that? Is it negative? Are you having negative self-talk? How is that affecting you on an emotional level? How can you understand this, get curious about it in order to recontextualize and throw off the inner voice of negativity? This is that Jupiter sextile Venus in Gemini. So there's a need to pay attention to what arises in the body, Mercury and Taurus, and to ground within that. This is also in a conjunction with the North Node in Taurus. So there's like, as we are wanting to dive deeply in a scorpionic way into our emotions and our inner psychology in order to liberate from the things that keep us separate from knowing our true selves, Pluto and Aquarius ruling that, we need to really ground into the body, Taurus, and be objective about what is going on internally. If you're nervous, if something happens externally and there's a reaction within your physiology, the body, ground into that and ask yourself, what is this about? And then be objective from there. And then take yourself to, how's this affecting me emotionally? Through doing this, we get to create inner security. You cannot be inwardly secure if you don't know how you react to certain situations, what your inner dialogue is, what certain things trigger you, all of that. So there's this call to really pay attention to how we are inwardly relating through listening to the inner voice. How are you talking to yourself? Is this rooted in a belief that has been conditioned? And then get curious, what would be a natural truth about you? This is this lunar eclipse. So a lot of people with Pluto being the ruler of this moon, Aquarius, and then being ruled by Uranus and Taurus, conjunct the sun and opposing this moon, can be having a lot of external things be triggered. And for a lot of people, we're looking at trauma. That is an Aquarius and Uranian dynamic. And so we are looking at how trauma has affected us. And it's really interesting to look at how our conditioning has created trauma. You can look at how colonization has which is conditioning, has perpetuated trauma within the collective. This is a more transpersonal way to view this. But if you're looking at this on through a personal lens, there can be things that get triggered where we have a trauma response. So there is a need to look at, what is my trauma response? Do I flight, freeze, fawn, or fight? And get to know yourself and understand where that is coming from, so you can challenge that and liberate from those dynamics in order to continue this realization of whom these natural truths are about you. So Jupiter and Chiron are both square to Mars in Cancer. So with Jupiter square to Chiron, Jupiter square to its ruler, Mars in Cancer, in order to understand our truths, we have to be able to dive deeply into the emotional body. There's so much there that can be revealed to each one of us. This is also looking at the polarity of Cancer, which is Capricorn. In order to take responsibility for ourselves, we have to dive into the emotional body. That means we're also looking at our conditioning and how it has affected us repressing, suppressing, or feeling oppressed. I talked about this, I can't remember if it was last week or when, but I can't tell you how many clients I get, and specifically men, who are very scared of their anger and their rage, and so they suppress it, and then they come into me and they tell me something that they feel horrible about doing, and it's because they couldn't control their anger, and it's because they haven't allowed themselves to feel angry in the moment whenever they felt it, and they suppress and they suppress. I think Kristen Fontana, for those of you, when this gets posted on the EA page, you guys will know who that is, but on my personal page, may not know who that is. But she is a great evolutionary astrologer, and she was talking about how the emotional body, whenever you suppress things, it's like a beach ball, holding it underwater. And whenever you hold it underwater and you're suppressing it, eventually what comes out? It pops out and it flies and it hits someone in the face, right? And that is exactly a beautiful metaphor she used for what happens when we repress our emotions. And so a lot of things are being exposed right now, especially repression and suppression of emotion, or we're having dynamics be triggered where we felt oppressed by others. And there's a need to not feel victimized. There's a need to understand how it's affected us on a psychological and emotional level in order to expose the hurt and the pain, in order to dive deeply, so that way we can evolve out of it. And this gets me to the point of Chiron squaring its ruler, Mars, in the sign of Cancer. Chiron, and a lot of people who have Chiron in Cancer are going to be feeling this. We have been in an initiation, which is a Aries dynamic and a Mars dynamic, since 2017, whenever Chiron went into the sign of Aries. So it was squaring that generation's Chiron in Cancer. But Chiron is this place where it's the wounded healer. And it is the place where we can't fix our wounding. It doesn't go away. It is a wound. It's the same as if you have a scab and it gets picked off and you touch that area, it still hurts. So Chiron squaring its ruler Mars in Cancer, there can be things that come up and are triggered where we get thrown back in on ourselves and go back to that moment in time where some traumatic or area of hurt happened that might be holding us hostage right now, and has been for a long time. And it is because of not being able, it hurts so bad, we don't want to explore the depths of the emotion that are there. And with the square from Chiron to Mars and Cancer, there is a call to act on feeling that. And through feeling it and taking in all the energy of this lunar eclipse happening, you can really get to the bottom of how that affected you and how it created insecurity or made you feel powerless. But the beauty in Chiron, when we have the courage, like Mars in Cancer and Chiron in Aries, the courage to fearlessly face these emotional dynamics, we can bring new awareness to them and recontextualize how we view this. And through that, we can actually not only help ourselves, but we can help others. And the wound doesn't ever go away, but the awareness can help heal it in a way that we didn't think could be imaginable. That doesn't mean that the awareness 5 years now, you could listen to a song that was playing or smell something that brings you back to that time period of your life, but you can not feel so hurt anymore. With Chiron squaring Mars and Cancer, for some people, they're going to be acting out their trauma right now, especially if they've been resisting it. And so that means where they might have felt victimized in the past, they are now being the perpetrator and lashing out because they are refusing to deal with the emotions that are surfacing, that are being triggered from whenever that occurred. And there is medicine and going deeply within and doing the inner work to really reveal the emotional dynamics and how it's affected each one of us. For a lot of people, this is childhood and family, especially with the Sun conjunct Uranus, especially with Chiron in Aries, and especially with Mars in Cancer. It's like where we felt like we didn't have an identity or we lost our identity at the hands of someone else. But there is a need in that to retrain our thoughts, especially for my fellow masochist out there, of why did you call that in at that time? Sometimes crap just happens and it's not okay. But there are things that we do call in on a soul level that we want to repeat because we haven't dealt with the emotional dynamics. And the only way to evolve is by going into the emotional body. And so there is a call to really dive into that and to explore it, Venus and Gemini, and to relearn what constitutes your needs, not the needs that are coming from a trauma response, not the needs that are coming from our conditioning, but our true needs, our true truths. So that way we can liberate from beliefs and an inner dialogue that is really keeping us from feeling the truth of whom we are and keeping us separate from experiencing the divine as well. So there's also Neptune square Venus happening while this is going down. And Neptune is the ruler of Saturn right now. And Neptune is square the North Node and Mercury and Uranus and the Sun's ruler Venus. So there is a call to act on the inner friction of understanding where we have felt powerless or where we have felt disillusioned or where we've experienced crisis, and to surrender to that instead of trying to control it. And then learning about it, learning about how it's affected us in our inner relationship, and understanding where maybe that has perpetuated us getting our needs met by others through an ulterior motivation or a hidden motivation or through manipulation, because it's a survival instinct. And this correlates back to Venus being the ruler of Uranus, the Sun, Mercury, and that North Node. So we're looking at what have we done? What are our values? How have we been inwardly relating? How have we gotten our needs met by others? And maybe where have we been manipulative about it? With Jupiter sextile Venus, there's a need to be honest about this. There's a need to be to have self-leadership, Jupiter in Aries, to have self-leadership about being honest and to explore that and how it's affected how we inwardly relate. And so it's like looking at our trauma responses of maybe you are someone who I'm trying to think. I have a personal story that reflects this. So whenever I was younger, I was in a relationship and it was extremely abusive, like all the abuse that you can think of. It was there. And it's because I felt like I deserved it on some level. Happy to say I do not feel that way now. So I don't want anyone to worry about me. But I stayed single for 6 years after that, and it literally almost cost me my life. Like that person is in prison for life as a direct result of his actions stemming from when we were together. But I stayed single for 6 years and I really felt like I had figured it out. It's laughable now. And then I got with my partner, and there were things that I did looking back that I had to own up to and be like, that was really manipulative, because I was projecting, which is another dynamic that can be going on during this lunar eclipse, is projecting prior experiences onto the current situation instead of looking at the truth. And that is part of this Neptune square Venus being ruled by Mercury retrograde in the sign of Taurus. The need to, and then the Uranus Sun conjunction, all of that together can equate really needing to look at our projections. But I was so afraid that I was going to be hurt by my partner the same way I had been hurt by my prior partner. Really, I had to forgive myself. I had to forgive myself because I didn't know if I could trust my choice making. And I had learned a lot, but I had to look at, these are two different people, two different situations. I've done a lot of inner work and I can trust myself. And I want to break the cycle of projecting bullshit onto this relationship. And I had to hold myself accountable in doing so. And so a lot of this can be coming up as well for people. A lot of needing to understand where they are projecting their fear from prior traumas and how that trauma has affected these dynamics and has conditioned us to do this. This is not a lunar eclipse that is for the faint of the heart. This is a lunar eclipse that says you want to grow, you want to evolve, you're going to have to dig deep and you're going to have to be honest. You're going to have to look at your part in things. You're going to have to look at what you've called in and what you need to release. And there is freedom in experiencing the emotions. I'm someone who has a heck of a ton Capricorn, and I would always be like, I feel everything, I'm fine. And I didn't realize how much I was repressing. And so you have to be willing to not repress and to really be honest with what is emotionally going on. And the best way to do that is to utilize all this Taurus that is occurring. That can be an access point. Our feelings get us in touch with our emotions. Our feelings are the key to unlocking our emotional dynamics within the emotional body. How are you feeling when someone says something to you? What is triggered in your body? Whenever you feel scared, what is going on externally that is triggering that? And then ask yourself, where is this coming from? What traumatic experience have I had? Because we are not supposed to be held hostage by our trauma. We are supposed to emotionally evolve out of that in order to reveal whom we naturally are. And oftentimes we call in situations as a way to be able to create inner security. One of the ways that evolution happens is we get thrown back in on ourselves in order to figure out how to do it for ourselves. I personally had to learn how to be my own mom and dad. I never got that growing up. Absolutely never got that growing up. And that is why I got into a situation, not that they were, but I chose to be born into a certain family and to experience certain dynamics, and then to have that conditioning placed onto me. And it conditioned me to how I did relationships with others whenever I was younger. And it caused me a hell of a lot of hurt until I realized I have to take and hold myself accountable for this. And what do I got to do to not have to experience this again or call this in again? And that is the karmic dynamics of this lunar eclipse. There's a lot of that going on. I'm not saying that this is exactly what everyone's going to be experiencing. I just want to give like a general flavor of there is a need to objectify and observe what our choices have created, why we chose to have certain types of conditioning, and how we need to reveal who we naturally are by sifting through that conditioning and how it's affected us in our day-to-day, moment-to-moment life. It's affected our choice making, it's affected how we inwardly relate, and it's affected who we call in on a personal level. And this is a full moon that is going to culminate a lot of these dynamics, whether it be friends, family, lovers, whomever. There is a call to really look at why, the bottom line of why. So if you are someone who is having external events triggered that are triggering internal events, lean into what is going on inside of you and why, and ask yourself, why did I call this in? What is my part in this? What can I do? What needs to be revealed about me that maybe I'm not wanting to see, so that way I can evolve out of it and I don't have to experience this again. So this is this exposing that is wanting to occur. So this can also be in the workplace. I've seen this is just another way of how I've seen this go on. I've seen a lot of people who are self-sabotaging right now, because they're not realizing their own insecurities. Mars in Cancer square Chiron and Jupiter and Aries can bring up a lot of insecurity, maybe insecurity that was hidden. Are you someone who is wanting to be in competition with other people? That results in, like, how is that manifesting? Is it manifesting in a way because you're compensating and you feel insecure? There is a plethora of ways that this full moon eclipse can show up in our lives. But the things that I want you guys to take away is the need to look at our expectations that might be idealistic, look at our conditioning, how that's affected our emotional and psychological dynamics. And there's a need to learn new values and needs and to be able to meet those for ourselves to create self-reliance. But we have to get to the bottom of these emotional and psychological dynamics, and we have to liberate from the conditioning that's perpetuating dysfunction and toxicity. And that means we have to look at what and where how we get our needs met and what constitutes power for us, what's known and familiar. And these can be people in our lives that are wanting to overpower us. So you've got to ask yourself, why am I calling this in? Why am I going through this? So it is all, I can tell you the bottom line, and this is a generality, it's all to whatever is going on is wanting to get you to dive into your emotions and to not suppress. And really, it's wanting to expose the emotional reality of maybe where you have suppressed certain dynamics or denied them. And is wanting us to really cultivate a better relationship with ourselves. That means learning how to inwardly validate ourselves and not needing someone else to do it, learning how to be fully self-sufficient, looking at how we have gone about our survival. It's very Taurus. Are you someone who is wanting to climb a ladder to get closer, and that's your ulterior motivation? I don't know. There's a lot that can go with this. There's a lot of ways that this can show up. More than anything, the divine within all of this astrology is saying, I want you to be emotionally secure. I want you to be self-sufficient. I want you to be able to be self-reliant, but you're going to have to really look at what your emotional dynamics are, what constitutes inner security. How are you talking to yourself? Is it negative or is it positive? How are you feeding your soul? Who are you having around you? Are they healthy? Are you giving and that's where you get your value from? Do you need to say no? There's a lot that's coming up for people right now. And I've personally seen suicide come up a lot the past couple of weeks with people. And one of my friends who was dealing with this has a very strong will to survive and has been through a lot of crisis. I can't talk about it on here, but I'm just going to say he's someone who's been through a lot of crisis. And whenever I look at him and he has the will to survive, he is doing the work that he needs to do and understanding and objectifying his internal dialogue. And then I've seen other people who are just wanting to deny that function altogether. And so they're just staying in this place of self-sabotage. So I'm seeing it manifest in a lot of ways through clients, through friends, and everything else in between. And so I just want to tell you guys, do this inner work. It is so scary because it's going against what feels secure, even if it's not healthy. So whatever is popping up, let it put a fire under your butt and make you like get after it and be like, why is this happening? What do I need to do? What do I need to pay attention to? Why? And get to the bottom of it, because we all want to be self-reliant and we all want to be emotionally secure. And the stuff that is coming up now can serve, even if it feels really crappy right now, serves the purpose of redirecting us so that way we can have that. Over the next 6 months, the things that come up all serve the purpose to allow you to understand yourself on a much deeper level. That way you can be fully self-secure and self-reliant. And so the key is to pay attention to yourself and to keep diving, do the inner excavation and evict what is not serving you on an external or internal level, and have a sincere intention. And know that if you have a sincere intention and you keep putting one foot in front of the other, even when you feel like, you know, the cloud of impending doom is hanging over you, it will change. It will change. And you will come up much better and brighter on the other side, and you will feel very proud of yourself. And there is nothing more than coming out of some BS and knowing that you fought hard for it to understand the why. That creates really, really, and I'm speaking from personal experience, really good, healthy self-esteem. And so I hope this helps you all. And this was a bit of a longer video, but there was a lot to cover. So hang in there for you guys who are dealing with a lot, and just know things are being activated so that way you can, on a soul level, you're choosing this because you believe in yourself. On a soul level, you're choosing this. You called it in this lifetime to deal with it for once and for all. So get after it. And I love all of you, and I will talk to you next week.